When I'm saying not have, like, everything you want, I don't mean not have an insane like, these people would have, even being conservative with their energy, insanely lavish lifestyles, even better than billionaires today. What I'm saying is maybe don't go blowing up stars for no reason. Like, don't
Yeah.
set off supernovas to be fireworks for your 100,000th anniversary of your civilization, because you might wanna save those stars for the future.
That would be pretty cool, though.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to Entropy Rising, where we talk about science and futurism. I'm your host, Jacob, and as always, I am joined with my wonderful co host, Lucas. Lucas, how are you doing today?
I'm spectacular, Jake. How are you?
I'm doing great, spectacular. I think that's a new one. This must be a particularly good day for you.
It's a good day. It's beautiful outside.
It is, it is. A little chilly for once.
Yeah. I mean, it's the end of August in North Carolina. It's usually hot.
Yeah, so happy about that.
Absolutely.
So, speaking of happiness, right, we're actually diving into the topic of post scarcity societies, talking about what happens when you actually remove the need for things from a society and how we could go about accomplishing that. And what are some of the ramifications when we actually achieve that goal?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really fun topic. We've touched on it a little bit here and there in a lot of our other episodes, but it's just talking about like when you have everything, like what then?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And how would we achieve that as a civilization? And would we even want to?
Those are all fair points. And first, I think we should spend a little time defining what we mean by post scarcity and what that actually entails. Because post scarcity doesn't just mean having a lot of something, right? Like, in a lot of ways, for example, modern society, we have a lot of food. If I'm not mistaken, I think the world as a whole produces more food than we actually need to feed our entire world population.
Yeah. I mean, you can see that in just how much food is thrown away all the time.
Exactly, but we're not yet at the point of being post scarcity for food, despite having more than we need. To truly be post scarcity, you need to have such an abundance of that resource, or at least getting that resource needs to be so cheap that it stops being an economic factor. It's just so readily abundant and so cheap that it's not something you factor into, like your bills, for example, or it's, virtually free to give out to people.
Yeah. Like it costs nothing to create for someone, therefore it costs nothing for you to receive it. And so it's just like breathing air, right? Like it is something that is just there. Now, people can argue that you can make essentially artificial post scarcity with very, very rich people because it doesn't affect them, right? So they almost live in like a life of post scarcity. But real post scarcity to me is everybody.
No,
Right.
and that is true to an extent. Yeah, you can have you don't need to necessarily have your entire population be post scarcity to be considered post scarcity. But I think most people, when they think of a post scarcity civilization, you do tend to think that at least a majority of that civilization is post scarcity.
Mhm.
And I actually like the example you brought up of rich people because air is obviously a great example of something we're post scarcity of, right? Or I guess there's no post. We've never had a scarcity of air, really.
Yeah.
But another one to think about too is almost like water here in many parts of the United States or many Western countries. It's not necessarily that water is free. And to be post scarcity on a resource, it doesn't have to be, in my mind, actually free. It just needs to be so cheap as it's not something that the average citizen of your civilization would need to factor in. And I know for many of us in the West, water is like that, right? Like I've never in my life thought, I hope I have enough money to pay my water bill. At least here in North Carolina, where we don't typically have droughts, water isn't something that costs a significant fraction of anyone's income.
Mm-mm.
A water bill is like between $10 and $20 a month.
Yeah,
So
maybe.
many middle class people in Western civilizations are almost to the point of being or feeling post scarcity with something like water, although that's obviously not true on a worldwide front. And another great example is that's something that can go away in the future as we run into water shortages.
That is very true. I was actually talking about this with my brother the other day because I just walked up to a faucet and I put water in it and I was like, man, just think like 300 years ago, we had to source this from somewhere, go to a creek. We had to exert effort
Yes.
and think about where our next water was going to come from. When was the last time that you guys ever thought, how am I going to get my water today?
Exactly. And for me, that's the definition of post scarcity that we need to think about. Not necessarily that it's free and everyone gets it. It's just, it's if it does cost money, because it's always going to take effort to extract resources, and different government types may go about handling that differently, whether it's provided free from the government, or you could still have post scarcity capitalistic societies where it's the basic needs are just so insanely cheap that, it's not an economic factor.
Yeah.
So that's a great example.
I completely agree, and I'll capitulate to your position on that because I definitely, could see if I'm spending a fraction, like 1% of my entire income on all of the things that I need to live. That's housing, food, things like that. And I can continue living my life without hindrance for less than 1% of what I'm making that month in income. That is post scarcity, is at least for those resources.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
exactly agree. And the definition I have for it is that it basically stops being an economically driven factor. So it's not necessarily that a civilization can't charge for resources, and it's just that they need to be so cheap and so readily available that it's not really, a driving goal for life.
Yeah.
Also, it's worth pointing out that when we talk about post-scarcity societies too, context matters a lot here. And we gave the example, of course, of water. That's a great one because we are reaching levels of feeling of post-scarcity in the West. That's obviously not true for many parts of the world. Same thing with food, but it can be other things too, like air. We've never even had a scarcity of air here on Earth, but perhaps as we expand out into space, that could start being a resource that has to be conserved a lot more and starts costing a lot of money. If you're living on a space station, perhaps you don't really think about paying for food and water, but you have to think also about paying for air. And now that's a scarce resource that needs to be managed.
Yeah, it's like it's like post non-scarcity.
Yeah, right?
Like something that we've always had, but now, is essential to life the same way that water would have been hundreds of years ago. You have to find a way to source it.
Yeah, exactly. And scarcity can come and go. You might be post scarcity of a resource now, and that it could become scarce in the future, either due to population growth or some type of event that limits your supply.
Yeah.
It does not have to be a permanent state. You can be a post scarcity society that loses that advantage, and you can also be post scarcity in one resource but not another.
Yeah, I feel like it's good that you bring that up because a lot of people, and even myself, when I think of post scarcity, it's like that's a civilization that has it all, has had it all for a while, and will always have it all,
Yes.
right? Because to get to that post scarcity point, like you're already imagining flying cars, automated food production, like nobody does anything anymore. I know that we've talked about it before, but it's just the people riding around on their chairs in Wall-E.
Yeah,
It's just everything that they could ever want, just right in front of their face.
and I think that's the typical. When I mention post scarcity, I always have people. There's always two things that come up. Is like people think everyone has everything and you're going to be bored all the time, and another one that comes up a lot is people saying conflating it with it has to be some sort of socialist or a government where the government gives you everything. I don't necessarily think either of those are true. I mean, you could have both of those be true,
Mhm.
but I don't think you necessarily have to. And to further your point about talking about how you can be scarce in some resources but not others, I've actually myself put together a little scale for how I like to think about post-scarcity civilizations.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's hear it.
We love our levels with like the Kardashev scale and stuff like that. So we've kind of followed that same format. And I've defined it starting from level 0 up to level 4, with level 0 being a society that is driven by scarcity. This is a civilization where your basic resources that you need to survive, things like food, water, shelter, energy, medicine, are scarce. You're basically fighting for everything. And a level 0 civilization would be something like a lot of humanity before the Industrial Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
You have people starving on the streets and people who are just homeless. And it's a good chunk of your population like that. Really, the only people who are making it are very wealthy or rich or well-to-do.
Yeah, like thinking about plebeians, paupers, things like that.
Yes, exactly. Then when we step up to the next level would be a level 1 post-scarcity society. Now, for me to be a level 1 post-scarcity society, your basic survival needs need to be met. This is things like basic food, shelter, healthcare, breathable air should not only be available to your average citizen, but need to be essentially free or at least so cheap that it's not a large economic factor. So a good definition for me of like a level 1 post-scarcity society would be something like basic assistance from the expanse. When we read these books, there's some chapters that take place on Earth, and you find out that they basically have a form of universal basic income where they provide all of the citizens of Earth with all the basic things they need to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for me, though, a level 1 post-scarcity society, you only need the basics. So it's not guaranteeing that you're thriving by any means. And if you've read The Expanse, which I know you have.
Yes, yeah. And or if you've watched the shows, you still see that they display poverty on Earth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got your basic subsistence. You're not going to starve to death. You've got a house to live in. You're going to get medicine, but you're not thriving. And so a level 1 post-scarcity society, you still might have scarcity driving a lot of the economy, but it's going to be scarcity of luxury goods. Maybe scarcity of having better living accommodations, better food, or all kinds of luxury driven things.
Mhm.
And a capitalistic society can absolutely function in a level one society.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like, I mean, I feel like we're almost close to that.
We are, yeah.
In the way that we are right now.
In many ways, many people in the West are getting closer to this because food is becoming relatively cheap for most people in the middle class in Western societies. But I still think we're a bit far away because, again, for me, this needs to be something that everyone can afford, or a large majority of your population, and
Mhm.
that's where I would say we're not quite close.
Okay, yeah,
If you're above a certain earning bracket, if you're in the middle class, then maybe you could be argued to be getting close to level one. But like shelter, for example, I don't think is not. We're definitely not nearing post scarcity in shelter.
no, no, definitely not. But it could be something that could be solved. But it is like kind of there, but also not. Same way that we're almost a level one on the Kardashev scale, but also not.
Yeah, exactly. So we're somewhere between like level 0 and level 1, I
Yeah.
would say. Now, level 2 for me is, I would say, is comfortable abundance. So not only is your survival guaranteed, right? You've got housing, you've got food, all of that stuff is just so readily available that it's just everyone has it. But it's also pretty good housing and food. You are comfortable. I would say this would be akin to living in being a middle class of a Western civilization, in the US, Europe, something like that. You've got healthcare covered, you've got food covered, you've got housing covered, and it does not take up a significant fraction of your income, or it's basically free. So imagine your normal middle class Westerner life, but
Mhm.
arguably close to free for that.
Yeah, I mean that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, no, it does, right? So I consider that like a level 2 society. Not only are people surviving, they're thriving, they're doing pretty good.
Yeah, to feel like a little bit satisfied in what they have and
Yeah.
things, not cramped or wanting for the basics anymore at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And now scarcities might still exist in these civilizations, but it's only going to be of, at this point, luxury goods. Like, maybe not everyone has a yacht, right? But most people can do whatever they want. Now, you
Mhm.
might still have some economic driven factors like wanting to have a bigger house than everyone else or social status, but you've got everything you need to be comfortable. But then when we move up to like a level 3 post scarcity society, for me, this is the point where all your material needs are met. Not only are you living in comfortable abundance, but everyone pretty much has any material facet that they could want. If you want it, you can pretty much have it within reason. Now, your government might still restrict what you can have because they don't want to be wasteful, but for all intents and purposes, you're living a great life. You get everything you want. You're at the level of like the Federation in Star Trek or the Culture in the Culture series.
Mhm.
And then just to round the scale out, for me, level 4 is total post scarcity. Not only are you living in this materially abundant society where all your physical needs are met, but now you have all of your mental and societal needs are met as well. Really, for me, like a level 4 society could probably only exist if you had something like mind uploading or virtual existence.
Well, I feel like that would definitely make sense because if you're talking about total post scarcity, you can have whatever you wanted. There are people out there that would want to rule over cultures, or people that
Exactly.
want to own planets, or have these crazy fantasies that they need to fulfill, and the only way to do that would be simulated.
And I agree with that. And then that's for me is the difference between like level 3 and level 4. Level 3, you've got everything you want, but there might still be the scarcity of like social positioning. You might be a ruler of like a government, or you might have some social status. Like maybe you're, the world's best chess player in like a level 3 society. So there's still
Mhm.
something to obtain. Level 4 is you can be anything. You want to rule the entire universe? No problem. We can throw you in a computer and you can have that.
Yeah. Yeah, just literally simulate whatever you want. It almost sounds like level 4 could be more achievable than level 3.
Oh, really? Well, I guess you can almost skip level 3 if you invent mind uploading, right? You could go
Exactly.
straight from.
Mhm.
And that's actually a good point, too, is because, yes, I presented this as a linear scale. It doesn't necessarily need to be. But also, scarcity can change a lot. You might have a level 4 post scarcity society that really only provides you with a bed to lay in and a feeding tube full of just gruel. But
Mhm.
your mind is jacked into this computer that just gives you everything you could possibly dream of, almost like the Matrix.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I do feel like you're like that is a level 4,
Yeah.
like a total post scarcity, because you might be, being fed consistently, but in your mind, you're eating gourmet meals, right? And you're eating them when you want, not constantly.
Mhm.
It's like you're saying, if they give you enough to stay alive, but they give you the illusion of fulfillment in all of those aspects of life, I feel like there's no difference.
Exactly. Yeah. So you might have a level 3 post scarcity society where people are getting all these material things that they need or they want. But a level 4 is post-scarcity society is only defined by having enough food and energy.
Yeah.
So, the definition of scarcity can change a lot depending on the context and the technology available. And I also do want to quickly differentiate between a post-scarcity society and a post-contempt society.
Okay.
Because there is a difference, right? Like if you decide to lobotomize your entire population and make it so they want for nothing because you've destroyed parts of their brains, I wouldn't say you're post-scarcity at that point. Just because they want for nothing because you've, damaged their brains doesn't magically make you post-scarcity.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could argue on both sides of that. Like, if I just play devil's advocate for a second, if you like, let's say that you weren't lobotomized, but you were encouraged mentally to feel like you only wanted to eat processed crickets, and that's all that you wanted to eat, and they had an abundance of that, and they gave it to you. I mean, if all that I wanted to do all day was sit down and eat crickets, and I had all the crickets I wanted to eat, I would feel like that was post-scarcity.
So for me, the difference between a post-scarcity and a post-contempt society is I do need to do some sort of brainwashing or manipulation to get that goal. So, if you raise somebody in a cult and brainwash them to want for nothing and then give them nothing, I don't think that means you're post-scarcity. That means you're post-contempt.
Okay. Yeah, I see that position.
It is a fuzzy line between the two, especially when you're reaching like level 4 post-scarcity societies where you might have people who are uploaded to a simulation and just being fed through a feeding tube. Some people might argue that's not post-scarcity, that's post-contempt. I would say it depends on whether the person wanted that or not. Like if you decide, I don't want to be in the simulation and I want to experience real life, can you still provide that person with everything they want in the real world? Then I would say, okay, you're probably a level 4 post-scarcity society. If you can't, you're probably bordering more on post-contempt.
Okay. So you would say then if we had like a Matryoshka brain society and everybody who was born essentially and put into a simulation where they like harvested their life force for energy or whatever you see in a lot of sci-fi movies. But if they were to leave that and they would just be living in like this mechanical drone driven like world where there's just like maybe one human being taking a shift and all that they have to eat is Soylent, that wouldn't be post-scarcity.
I would say probably not. Yeah, at that point you're a civilization. You actually have a lot of scarcity. You're just hiding it with your, actually I don't know, maybe that is post-scarcity. It's really tricky and the line does start to border when you get to these more extreme societies.
And I mean, I guess that's what makes it fun to contemplate. But I personally, right, going back to like if I was brainwashed into wanting nothing and then got nothing, I would agree with you that that's post-contempt.
Yeah.
Right. But if I could upload my brain or my consciousness and have literally every situation that I could ever want and be kept alive to experience that for as long as I wanted to, I would say that that's post-scarcity, in my opinion.
No, that's fair. And I mean, this also ties into even taking a step back from these extreme societies. You don't have to have a homogeneously post-scarcity society to be post-scarcity. You might have Earth be post-scarcity. Everyone can have everything they want, but some colony out on the outskirts of space that's just reached a new star system could be a level 0 or a level 1 where they are still earning their right to survive.
Well, and realistically, they would be, right? Because the entirety of post-scarcity, not including uploading your consciousness, in the physical world, you have to set up a logistics and infrastructure system to be able to do that. Therefore, if you are landing on a planet and you're colonizing it and it hasn't already been colonized by androids or machines 100 years prior, you're going to be facing some kind of scarcity.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to have to be putting in effort and work to create that society of post-scarcity.
Yes, I agree. So you might have civilizations where some areas are post-scarcity and some areas are not. And that's, just going to depend on the civilization and what they value. Speaking of that too, you can also have governments that go about this in different ways. It's very possible you could have a civilization that is post-scarcity. All of the materials needed to sustain people are so cheap and readily available, they could give everyone everything for free, but they decide that that isn't in the best interest of their population. So they still might require people to have jobs and to do some type of work to earn their place in society.
Yeah, okay. So now that is an interesting thing to bring up as well, because I hear people talk a lot about like universal basic income.
Yes.
Things like that, where it's like you still work, but you get like enough money to meet your basic needs. But they believe that some people believe it would be good. Some people believe it would be bad. And people wouldn't use that to cover their basic needs, but they'd spend it on, frivolous things and still essentially be starving at the end of the month just with a flat screen TV. I feel like people should work, especially because a basic need of people is to feel fulfillment. And how do you get that if you have no struggle?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you could go about that in different ways. Perhaps you strive for all of your basic material needs are met, but you strive for social needs. Maybe you strive to be the best at something or to be renowned.
Hmm.
So there could still be other avenues to have you're calling it struggle, but goal and ambition to give your life meaning. But yeah, you are absolutely right. That is an issue with post-scarcity societies is that people may just sit around and do nothing and be very miserable in their lives. And we have studies that show that when people retire, their health tends to degrade faster if they do nothing versus if they maintain some type of purpose, whether that be hobbies or work.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that makes sense. And I feel like a government might know that, right? Statistically. And that's why they might implement a system like you were saying before, where yes, you get the option of having all of your basic needs met if you want to spend your money that way, but you still have to work towards something, and it may not be these menial factory jobs anymore. It could be something that's more creative or artistic, like you have to design something or, build infrastructure, but in a creative way that you can express yourself. That way their society feels like they're contributing and they feel fulfilled, yet they still want for nothing.
I could absolutely see a society like that happening where it doesn't have to be even a government. It could just be a societal thing. Like society will not accept you unless you're seen as contributing something.
Hmm.
And I could see a society forming around the idea that those who sit around and do nothing are a drain on the society. And you could be socially outcasted if that's what you decided to do with the resources that are provided. So there may be this other driving factors that aren't like governed by law that mean people try to contribute somehow, some way.
Yeah.
So that could absolutely happen. Or, of course, it could also be driven by law. Like, hey, we'll make sure that you can meet all of your basic needs to exist, but you need to do something.
What's interesting is I can actually see it going either way at the point that our society is right now, because I see a lot of people, they see the less fortunate people in our societies as freeloading while others sympathize with their position. And then but they're still required by law to go out and seek job and employment if they want these benefits, right?
And required by law is actually a good way of putting it because in many places, homelessness is becoming basically illegal.
Yeah, like you can be homeless, but you can't just be homeless. Like you have to be homeless and applying for jobs on Indeed.
Well, I just mean like some cities are adding laws that make it illegal to sleep in public. So it's effectively illegal to be homeless.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, then you see that's going more towards the society is disgusted by you.
Yeah.
Tilting that way, right? Which is why I can see it going either way with how it could be perceived. But I feel like having a society where we view somebody not contributing at all while some other people are, we will always see that as bad.
Maybe. I don't know. It's going to be interesting because we're facing almost a crisis of joblessness in the future where we're seeing all of these automation and AI coming up. So this next couple of decades could really change how society feels about people who are unable to maintain gainful employment. Because it has been for a very long time, the past couple hundred years, that society looked down upon people who couldn't get or maintain work. They saw it almost as a failing of you because jobs are out there and you're not doing it. Regardless of how true that is how a lot of people in society feel about those who are not maintaining gainful employment. I do wonder how that mindset is going to change as more and more people are struggling to maintain employment.
Yeah, I mean, it might shift. Let's say that society as a whole, we might accept that people can't have gainful employment, but then you come down to a level of where if you're competing in the world, like let's say for just in a perspective, like for a girlfriend or a boyfriend or something, they will want a partner who does more, does better, gets more. So therefore, like even though society as a whole might not be judging you, you might still face hardship because of that position.
And that makes sense. That's what we're talking about with like level 2 and level 3 civilizations where all of your material needs are met, but if you want to participate in society or luxuries and stuff like that, there's still scarcity. It's just not material scarcity.
Mhm.
You might have everything you need to survive, but if you want to achieve certain end goals, you might still need to go out and earn your existence.
Yeah.
And it could be the case, and this is the interesting part, you might have societies where that's not even necessary. There is enough automation to give everyone everything they want, but they still opt to have that system just because, and like what we were saying, it might be the case that they find that's better for people in the long run versus just giving them everything they want.
Yeah.
Or, you could even take a more dystopian tact and say you might have civilizations that are post-scarcity in the sense that they have the ability to be post-scarcity, but they choose not to be through artificial scarcity, either to control their population or for a variety of other reasons.
Yeah, you'll see that in portrayals of megacorporation planets in sci-fi films and stories, just because they want to bleed dry every dollar that they can. Therefore, they still make things that are essentially free, cost a huge chunk of somebody's paycheck. Therefore, like you said, creating almost like a feeling of artificial scarcity.
Yeah, whether that's to control somebody, to have a class divide, or, any reasons that could happen. I've been reading a lot of Warhammer 40K, so that's kind of what's coming to my mind when I'm thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's all kinds of different societies that can come up through this. And, arguably, I think a lot of different types of government too. I don't think you necessarily need this government that gives all the people everything. You can still have capitalism in post-scarcity societies. It's just that capitalism wouldn't revolve around basic needs. It would revolve around luxuries.
Mm-hmm. Things to show off, to feel like you have one up on somebody. Everybody might still be buying the new version of the iPhone 75 or whatever it'll be at that point.
You can have the government phone 100 or the brand new sleek one that comes out and you have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, exactly, you can still have economic drive of non-critical things and be post-scarcity and basic subsistence, but not in other aspects of your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I guess ties into this idea of equality. I think a lot of people believe that a post-scarcity society is a truly equal society.
Mm.
And I see that depicted a lot. And I think that's a lot of the mindset people have when I mention post-scarcity. Like, well, greed always exists. We could never be post-scarcity because greed exists. But I do want to say, I don't think post-scarcity necessarily means post-inequality. You can still have a post-scarcity society that's unequal.
Yeah. And, it's also in just like social status as well. Like, I feel like when people have all of this stuff, like there will be even more pressure to just fit into a norm. It reminds me of that Black Mirror episode of the woman who, like, as she does things, she has this home and everything, and she doesn't really work, but she has you have like social points.
Oh, I know
and
that
you
one,
can
yeah.
read them on people like as they walk by you, and if they do stuff that is unfavorable, they lose points, and the more points you lose, the less you get for free. Right. And so I feel like that could be a dystopian sort of version of a post-scarcity society.
Yeah, where all your basic needs are met, but if you want to advance, you need to have this like social credit.
Yeah.
So all of your material needs are there, but there's scarcity in these social aspects.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, like you could have all of your social aspects met, but it's like very, very dependent on who you are, like not being an individual, but being like part of this gigantic conglomerate.
Absolutely. And speaking of inequality too, there's also the question of who controls the resources, right?
That is a good question.
Are these 100% automated, controlled by some AI entity, or are they controlled by governments, or do we have truly distributed wealth? I mean, think about it like this way. If you've got all of your energy coming from nuclear fusion power plants, it might be the case that there's only a few of those controlled by the government, and you're post-scarcity, but you're relying on the government to provide that to you, which means somebody's in charge. So that's an inherent inequality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be the case you have a distributed model of goods and services. Like if everyone's getting all of their power through solar collectors, for example, no one person controls the solar collectors, and maybe the wealth of the world as a whole maintains the distribution center to share that power, like power lines and stuff like that. So now you not only do you have post-scarcity, but it's a much more egalitarian society. No one controls all the resources.
Yeah. I feel like that would be a better definition of post-scarcity. Like when I think about it, I think that government at this point is automated. Like the people that would need to fix a problem that arose, that has also been like automated.
Yeah.
It's just like everybody is just living, but the way that humanity is I don't see that as ever being like a possibility. Somebody will always crave like power over those things. Like how would we get that initial step of getting somebody to be like, okay, I relinquish power over this to just everybody has equal distribution of that.
Yeah, and it could be really hard. It could happen accidentally, if solar just becomes insanely cheap and everyone decides to throw them on their house. Maybe you just accidentally reach a point where everything's been distributed anyways, and now the need to have an overarching ruler or controller of that starts to diminish,
That is actually a good point. It just like they have a slip up, and now they're like, "What are you gonna do about
Yeah.
it?"
You don't, yeah. How can you control? You can't control the masses if we have everything we need. Not that it would happen, but also, when you watch Star Trek, they have the replicator tech. If you invented something like that, like a universal replicator that could repurpose matter into anything and it's cheap and abundant and power's abundant, not only do you have a post-scarcity society, but you also have a truly equal society. Everyone can get everything they need and they have readily and abundant power to power that machine. It's not only that no one wants for nothing, but you really can't control anyone either. You don't have any leverage from the top.
Yeah, because they can just have whatever they want.
Yeah, exactly.
Whenever they want to.
So yeah, it is definitely interesting thinking about all of the different types of scarcity. And in my mind, ultimately scarcity comes down to energy. It always comes down to energy.
Yeah, I mean, everything comes down to energy at the end of the day. Like when we talk about things that are achievable and things that we want, it really does all just come down to how much energy we can harness and use.
Absolutely. So if you've got some cheap and easy way to produce energy, you're one step closer to being post-scarcity. And I think that's why there's always been this drive for nuclear fusion. And, a lot of people believe that achieving nuclear fusion, this cheap and abundant source of clean energy, is going to liberate us and make our civilization so much better.
Yeah, I mean, well, luckily it's only 10 years away.
Yeah, right? It's 20. It's always 20 years away.
Luckily, it's only 20 years away. But yeah, I completely agree with that. It's just like when you get to that point of thinking about it that way, then, energy generation will always require something. So, like, if you're starting from how are we getting that energy and trickling down to people wanting nothing, like, there will have to be somebody expelling something.
Yes.
To get unlimited energy like that.
True, but I think we tend to think of this as like an automated system. It's not that energy isn't being expended, resources aren't being expended. It's just that think about it, if you can create, and we talked about von Neumann probes in our last episode, if you create self-replicating probes that go out into our solar system, mine the resources themselves, build the solar collectors themselves, deliver that power themselves, who really owns it at that point? You might own the first one, right? But when you build up and build up and build up and have this entire system, it might be argued that no one really owns it. This is just a net gain for society as a whole. And you can't be the evil corporation that goes, well, we built the first probe, so we own everything they create. Or maybe you can. It depends on your government.
Yeah, I feel like you're right though. Like that would cause conflict. It would be like you own half of the universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, shut up. There's no way.
And I think at a certain point, that's the exact mindset people would have. Be like, this is ridiculous. Absolutely not. You don't get to own the entire Dyson swarm because you built the first probe and it went out and self-replicated. And I think everyone's going to stand up to that and go, no, it's the entire world versus you. We're taking that for the collective good. Or governments will take it or something like that.
I mean, it definitely does make sense. It really is so hard for me to mentally comprehend like that leap of there's nobody claiming or owning, but it really is just like a jump back like to when you used to live off the land. Like nobody owned anything. It was just you, your land, you maintained everything, you generated what you needed. Except at this point, it's not you, it's you just having the robots that do that for you.
Exactly. And that's, I think most people, when they think of post-scarcity, it always ties into automation of labor. That's actually where the idea of post-scarcity came from in the first place, is people saw automation growing, and that's when the ideas of, oh, what happens when automation takes all the jobs and everything is free and readily available? That's where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and it's one that is becoming very relevant pretty quickly.
Yes, especially with AI.
Yes, with AI and with the development of like these new humanoid robots that people are saying are going to start taking like mining jobs, factory positions, farming jobs. When we get rid of that workforce that generates these raw materials that we need and we advance that way, you need to think about how are the general population going to survive?
Yeah, exactly. Are you just going to have all of these resources go to the people who made these machines? I think eventually people are going to get fed up with that and say, no, we need to rethink this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like it can't go to these companies that are just generating it because literally billions of people will starve.
Yeah. So, and I think that's going to drive people away from that option, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I do want to touch on, there are some bottlenecks to post-scarcity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you do have magic replicator technology from Star Trek, ultimately thermodynamics still rules the universe. You still have entropy, which means you still have waste heat being created from these processes. So maybe you might be post-scarcity in all your material resources, but you can still only have so much energy on a planet before the whole planet overheats.
Okay.
So you might be post-scarcity on what people can create, but you might still limit it because if you have these mega cities like Coruscant from Star Wars, you might need to limit how much waste heat people produce.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. These people using these essentially automated machines to create all these different things, is that generating more heat than the world can, manage? And also, you find in these places where people have more of what they want, there's less actual people being born. And if that correlates to it, we would have less humans that would produce excess heat and more machines to create the things that the humans that are alive would want.
Maybe, maybe not. That's always tough to say because we tend to think as technology advances, the lifespans will also increase.
Mm-hmm.
So, right now we see birth rates dropping, but if, people are living hundreds of thousands of years, you only need to have one kid to replace yourself, right? So
That is true. You would have 10 generations within your lifespan.
yeah. So we don't necessarily know that birth rates will continue to drop, especially as lifespans increase. We just don't know. I mean, it's impossible to guess what'll happen, especially with how civilization will handle that.
That is very true.
But I tend to think as lifespans increase, populations will continue to grow. But it will be interesting to see if instead of you being regulated on how much energy you consume or how many materials you consume, you're regulated on how much waste heat you produce. Maybe it's not, oh, you can only have X amount of material things. It's you can only waste X amount of heat. You get 10 kilojoules of energy that you're allowed to waste or something like that. And once you hit that, you're cut off. You need to control it. And that's how they control it.
Yeah, it's like scarcity, not in what you can obtain, but just how much of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that could be regulated by the, whatever is controlling all of this. It's also interesting to think about how these post-scarcity civilizations would deal with things like the death of the universe. I mean, if you're in a civilization that is post-scarcity, you've got everything you could ever possibly want, and people are living for basically forever, then you might start to think about, well, how long is the star going to last for? How long are all of these stars going to last for? Do we want to start thinking now, let's conserve energy today and be reasonable about our quality of life so that the civilization as a whole can last longer? Or are we just going to go, balls to the wall and just use everything while it's here and not worry about what it's going to look like in a trillion years?
Well, I mean, I just feel like in all the other episodes that we've had, a civilization like this will just be like, oh, we'll just move to an accretion disk.
But even those only last forever. Time will always be scarce. Unless we can crack entropy and reverse entropy, you might be post-scarcity on everything else, but eventually you will run out of time.
I mean, I just feel like that argument will be a difficult one because it's like, okay, live not as incredibly lavish a lifestyle as you want to, so that, 50 trillion years later, we can still have people living this lifestyle.
Unless there might be people.
That's true. Unless you're saying that these people can live actually forever, and every moment that they're wasteful, they're taking moments off of their life, then you could probably get people to agree, okay, let's not be so crazy. But nobody's going to care about what is happening to someone 500,000 generations later.
Also, when I'm saying not have like everything you want, I don't mean not have an insane, like these people would have, even being conservative with their energy, insanely lavish lifestyles, even better than billionaires today. What I'm saying is maybe don't go blowing up stars for no reason. Like don't set off supernovas to be fireworks for your 100,000th anniversary of your civilization, because you might want to save those stars for the future.
That would be pretty cool, though.
Yeah, it would be cool. It would be cool. But that's what I mean by not being wasteful and wanting to be conservative. Is post-scarcity saying, I can do anything I want at any time, I'm going to go set off a supernova because I want to see it? Or is it saying, yes, I can do that, but I want to save that star?
No, I mean, that definitely puts it into a better perspective, but I'm still struggling. I want to see the supernova fireworks.
That's fair.
Like, man, that sounds cool. But, I do get that people would probably agree that sacrifice would have to be made at some point.
Exactly. Like, all right, let's calm it down a little bit. Or, maybe also limit the processing speed of your Matryoshka brain. Or, I don't know. That one's a tough one because if you increase processing speed, you get to experience more time per time. So maybe that would be a case of, let's spend on the energy now to have the longest subjective reality.
That is true. If it could outdo the actual, like if you perceive that you're surviving for 500 million years or billion years longer than the actual universe would survive if you slowed it down, then I feel like that would be worth it.
Yeah, so it's all kinds of interesting things they might have to deal with.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you have to say about post-scarcity societies?
No. I feel like that was That was a really wild topic to think about, actually.
That was. So, well, thank you all so much for listening. We always appreciate you listening to our show. Please do us a favor and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform of choice. We're hoping to hit 1,000 subscribers before we hit 1 year, and we're about halfway there. We have 550 last time I checked. So
Wow.
subscribing does really help us on whatever podcast platform you prefer. Please join us next week where we'll be discussing cities that span over the entire world.
Ecumenopolis.
Thank you, Lucas, 'cause I cannot say that word. I have a week to study. Thank you all for listening and take care.
Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.